A baby, alone, in the middle of a blizzard, no one carrying him, no one coming for him. Just a tiny infant dragging himself across a frozen mountain range on pure spite. That's how this story begins. But wait, rewind even further, because before the baby, there's a funeral. And the guy being buried? He's still awake for it. Picture this, a teenage boy pinned to the ground, sword through his chest, staring up at the man who raised him. His brothers are standing there holding the blade. His father is watching with the same expression you'd have putting down a farm animal. And the last thing this kid ever hears before he dies is the truth. That his entire life, every year of training, every humiliation he swallowed, every time he told himself just work harder, none of it was ever about him. He was livestock, raised to be slaughtered. Then he wakes up as a baby, and years later, a fully grown version of that same kid walks into a military exam, stares down a massive iron pillar that an entire crowd of elite soldiers couldn't dent, and reduces it to rubble with a single swing. And that's still not even the best part. The best part is the cousin who spent his whole life mocking this guy publicly wets himself in front of the entire noble council. The best part is the adoptive sister, brainwashed, masked, reduced to a starving pet by a sadistic senior, and the moment her brother decides the only way to free her is to voluntarily lock away his own power and go 10 days without food or water. The best part is that during those 10 days, when a group of elite-ranked assassins corners him in a forest while he's half dead and weaponless, his body just decides it isn't dying again. This is the rebel of the Tyrant Noble House. Let's go. Start at the Academy, the Dorsal Royal Knight Academy. There's an entrance exam happening, and it is not the normal kind. The examiners have set up a series of enormous stone and iron pillars in an open arena, each one reinforced with concentrated magical energy. The assignment is simple. Break 1. Show us what you're made of. Candidates line up. These aren't random people. These are the sons and daughters of warrior noble houses, kids who've been training since they could walk, some of them carrying bloodlines that go back centuries. One by one they step up. One by one they hit the pillars. The pillars do not care. A few candidates manage shallow cracks. One particularly explosive guy with a 3-wing crest blasts off a corner chunk, and the crowd acts like he just moved a mountain. The examiners take notes. Most of the applicants fall somewhere between impressive for their age and respectable. For this level of entrance exam, that's the expected range. Then this one guy steps up. No announcement, no dramatic posture. He just walks forward, rolls his shoulder once, and swings his blade. The pillar doesn't crack. It doesn't chip. It doesn't break in half. It detonates. The shockwave from that single strike rolls across the entire arena. Candidates stumble. Examiners grab their tables. Dust billows out in every direction, and when it clears, the pillar is simply gone, reduced to a scatter of powder and fragments across the floor like it was made of chalk and someone sneezed on it. Dead silence. Then everyone starts talking at once. Who is that? What family? What's his crest level? Because no one in living memory has done that to one of those pillars in a single hit. Not even the top-ranked candidates from the main noble houses. You need a serious magical output to pull something like that off. The kind of output that doesn't just move things, it erases them. His name, for now, is Aster. And the story of how he got here is so wild it almost doesn't fit in a single sentence. But let's try anyway. He was murdered. Then he was reborn. And every single person responsible for the first part of that sentence is about to have a very, very bad time. Back up 14 years. His name back then was Ash. Not Aster, Ash. And the first thing you need to know about Ash is that by every visible measurement, the kid had nothing going for him. No family. His mother was a woman with no noble blood and no connections, and she froze to death in a snowstorm when he was barely old enough to walk. He survived that snowstorm himself, somehow, which in retrospect should have been a massive clue to everyone around him that something unusual was going on with this child. But nobody thought to look that hard. What they did do was take him in. Specifically, Duke Roderick Elmheim, head of the main branch of House Elmheim, one of the most powerful martial noble families on the continent. Roderick extended a hand to this orphaned, magicless nobody and said, "Come live with us." And Ash, because he was a small child with nowhere else to go, said yes. Here's the thing about the Elmheim household. It runs on power, not complicated political power. Raw, physical, magical power. Wing crests. Every person in this world develops magical energy stored in their body. and the physical manifestation of that energy is a set of wing-shaped crests that appear on a person's back. One wing is baseline, competent, useful. 2 wings represent a real warrior. 3 wings puts you in serious fighter territory. 4 wings can level buildings. 5 wings is where the exponential curve starts turning vertical. Each wing after that multiplies the previous output by a terrifying amount. 7 wings is a myth. 7 wings is what the old texts describe as the originator, a being capable of reshaping the world by raw magical output alone. Nobody alive has 7 wings. The concept is basically legend. Ash, as far as anyone can tell, has 0. No crests, no magical ability, nothing. Just a kid with decent physical reflexes and a stubborn refusal to quit that impresses literally no one at the table of a powerful magical warrior house. He trains anyway. For years, Ash trains without magical support. Pure physical swordsmanship, conditioning his body past its natural limits just to keep up with the rest of the house. His brothers mock him constantly. They don't pull their punches either. It's mean, deliberate, grinding cruelty delivered daily by kids who know they're untouchable. His father, Roderick, never defends him. Roderick watches with flat, cold eyes and occasionally makes a comment about Ash needing to work harder. Ash works harder. What else is he going to do? He gets good, not great. He can't be great without magic in a world built on magical power, but genuinely, impressively good at pure swordsmanship. Better than he has any right to be. Better than anyone expected from someone the house privately considers a charity case. And then comes the night everything ends. He's 17, it's late. He gets called to a back courtyard of the estate, the kind of place that doesn't have a lot of foot traffic after sundown. Not a warning sign, as far as Ash knows. He's been summoned places before. What greets him is his brothers. Both of them, armed. It happens fast. They're on him before he fully processes the situation, holding him down, someone's blade piercing through, and Ash is pinned to the ground looking up at the night sky with something wrong happening to his chest that his brain is still struggling to categorize. Then Roderick steps into view, not rushing, not panicking, calm as a man checking on his garden. Ash, on the ground, bleeding, manages to ask the only thing that matters, why? And Roderick tells him, 7 wings. Ash has had 7 wing crests this entire time. From birth. The most powerful magical endowment that exists. The kind of power the world thought was extinct. The kind described only in ancient texts as belonging to beings that were barely human. It was there, living inside him, visible on his back if anyone had ever looked with the right eyes. Roderick knew. From the moment he took Ash in, he knew. He wasn't being charitable. He wasn't extending kindness to an orphan. He was running a farm. You let the livestock grow before you harvest. You let the magical crests fully develop, fully mature into their final form, and then you take them. That's the whole plan. That was always the whole plan. Every year Ash spent in that house being mocked and worked to exhaustion, he was being fattened up, prepared. The training wasn't for Ash's benefit, it was maintenance. Keep the animal healthy until it's ready to slaughter. Ash dies on that courtyard floor with the full weight of that understanding pressing down on him. Then his eyes open. Snow, cold. He's tiny. Ash comes back to awareness in the middle of a snowstorm, in a body approximately the size of a loaf of bread, with every single memory of his entire previous life completely intact. He is an infant. He is outside. He is freezing. And somewhere in the dark behind him, he can hear voices. Search party voices. Roderick's people, already out looking for the infant body that appeared near their territory. Because apparently Ash didn't regress into his old bedroom, he regressed somewhere inconvenient. So what does he do? He crawls. A baby, in a blizzard, crawling away from a search party, up and over a mountain range, on nothing but the iron-willed determination of a person who has already died once and is absolutely not doing it again. By any reasonable physical standard, this should be impossible. But the thing is, and this is something that becomes a running theme, Ash's body is not a reasonable physical object. 7 wings of magical energy, even in an infant form, provides a degree of biological resilience that defies easy categorization. His body runs hotter than it should. He doesn't lose sensation in his extremities the way he ought to. He keeps moving, he makes it. On the other side of that mountain he's found, not by Roderick's people, by a traveler. and that traveler brings him to the one person in the Elmheim family who is, against all evidence from the rest of the house, genuinely decent. Viscount Hifried Elmheim, Roderick's older brother. The two of them could not be more different if they tried. Where Roderick is calculated and cold and deeply invested in power as an end in itself, Hifried is warm, honorable. The kind of man who sacrificed his own sword arm years ago to protect his family and doesn't treat that like a tragedy. Just something that happened, and he adapted. He's also running what the main family considers a disgraced branch line. No prestige, no political clout, limited resources. The kind of extended family that gets invited to the big gatherings only so the main house can have someone to look down at. Hifried takes one look at this infant who apparently crawled over a mountain alone in a blizzard and immediately decides to adopt him. He names him Aster. Aster grows up in this house, and it is nothing like the first one. There's Hifried, who treats him like an actual son. There's Alphen, who becomes his closest sister, gentle, caring, the kind of person who always has something kind to say and means it. There's Kudo, his older sister who is aggressive and demanding and never satisfied with anything less than his absolute best, which in a weird way is exactly what he needs. And there are others, Marfa and the younger sisters, a whole household that functions like a household is supposed to function, with people who actually care whether each other lives or dies. Aster, for the first time in 2 lifetimes, has a real family. He also has his 7 wings back. They're there on his back, fully intact, which makes sense, since Roderick never got to take them before the regression happened. But Hifried, when he discovers this, gives Aster very specific advice. Hide it. Tell no one. Let them keep thinking you're nothing. Aster is very good at letting people think he's nothing. He spent a whole lifetime doing it. He trains. 4 years pass, then 6, then 10. He grows. He develops control. Partial control, anyway. The problem with 7 wings isn't power. It's the opposite of the problem he had before. In his first life, he had no magic at all. In this life, he has so much that controlling it requires constant mental discipline just to keep it from overwhelming him. Too much output and he loses control entirely. Enters a kind of magical berserk state that endangers everyone nearby, himself included. Containing it is a skill. He's working on it. At 10 years old, his branch family gets invited to the main house's annual gathering. The sword dance event, basically a formal display of martial ability where the noble houses show off their fighters. And for the branch families, it's traditionally a humiliation showcase. The main house invites them to make sure everyone sees who sits at the bottom of the hierarchy. Aster goes, and one of his former brothers is going to be there. Darius Elmheim, the one who held the blade. 4 wings. The current prodigy of the main house, being groomed as the standard bearer for the next generation. He's been raised his whole life to understand that he is better than everyone around him. Certainly better than any branch family member, and especially better than whatever stray orphan his uncle Hifried decided to collect. The gathering starts with exactly the tone you'd expect. Branch families seated further back, fewer servants, quieter sections, the main house occupying the prestigious positions up front, Roderick surveying the whole thing from his seat like a king watching his court. Darius spots Aster and makes a beeline for him, not subtly. He walks up to the branch family's table, makes a comment about strays and charity cases, and then, because he wants to make absolutely sure the insult lands, takes his cup and pours it directly onto Alphen's face. Cold juice, right to the face, in front of everyone, like she's furniture. Like she doesn't exist except as a prop for his little demonstration. Alphen doesn't react. She's been trained her whole life to swallow this treatment from the main house. That's what branch families do. Aster reacts differently. He challenges Darius to the arena right then. Formally, in front of witnesses, the way that can't be quietly brushed aside. And Darius, thrilled, because this is exactly the kind of public lesson he loves delivering, accepts immediately. The arena goes quiet when they step in. Everyone present knows the math. Main house prodigy, 4-wing crest. Actual magical ability, trained since birth by the best tutors in the family, against a branch house stray with no known crests and no documented magical ability. This shouldn't even be a contest. This is barely worth watching. Darius opens with a magical barrage. 4-wing output is nothing to dismiss. The guy can generate explosions, compress force into his blade strikes until they hit like artillery, and he does all of it with practiced precision that comes from a decade of elite training. He's not playing around. He launches a full sequence right out of the gate, the kind of combination designed to overwhelm and destroy. Aster reads every single movement before it happens. Not magically, not through some special power he unleashes dramatically, he just reads it. A decade of training in 2 lifetimes, a master-level understanding of body mechanics and sword forms, and the extremely useful experience of already knowing how this person fights from when they sparred back in his first life. Darius has tells. Aster cataloged every one of them years ago. He moves through the barrage like walking through a light rain. Not showy about it, economical. 1 step, adjust. 2 steps, avoid, reposition. The magical explosions hit empty space where he was standing half a second ago. Then he closes the distance. What follows is not a prolonged exchange. Aster gets inside Darius's guard, and in the span of 3 seconds, takes apart the technique his brother spent years building. 1 strike shears the blade. A second breaks the backup. A third sends Darius down to his knees. Standing over him, Aster reaches out very slowly and taps him on the cheek. Gentle. Almost delicate. The exact face that received Alphen's juice. Darius is on his knees, swordless, cheek stinging, in front of the entire noble council, and he has no idea what just happened to him. The crowd has no idea what just happened. Duke Roderick, in his seat up front, has very much an idea what just happened. His eyes are on Aster in a way that suggests he's running calculations. And then, because Roderick's first priority has always been the optics of power, rather than the well-being of anyone in his family, he does something that shocks even the people who thought they knew him. He walks into the arena, produces a blade, and slashes open Darius's hand. His own son, who just lost a fight. The punishment for embarrassing the main house is delivered immediately and publicly, because Roderick needs everyone to understand that failure is not tolerated regardless of who you are. Darius bleeds on the arena floor while his father sheathes the weapon with the same energy someone puts into hanging up a coat. Aster watches all of this. And then, because he still has a spine in this life that his first life ground down to nothing, he says something to Roderick. He doesn't bow. He doesn't defer. He meets his surrogate father's eyes, the man who murdered him, and he refuses to yield an inch of ground. Roderick hits him through a wall, full force. Not a lesson strike, not a controlled demonstration. The head of the family unleashes actual killing intent on a child at a formal gathering, because the alternative is letting someone look him in the eyes without flinching. Aster goes through the wall, lands hard, gets up. The look on his face, as he stands, dust on his clothes and blood on his lip, it's not fear. It's not even anger exactly. It's more like confirmation. He needed to know what Roderick still was, in this life. Now he knows. He goes home and trains harder. Hifrid is waiting for him when he gets back. Not with questions, not with a lecture, not with the exhausted parental energy of someone who just found out their kid picked a fight at a formal noble gathering. Hifrid looks at Aster, takes in the split lip, the dust, the hole in the back of the boy's shirt where the wall left its mark, and nods once. Like he expected this. Like he's been waiting for this specific moment for years. He takes Aster to the back of the estate. There's a room there that Aster has walked past 100 times without thinking much about it. Hifrid opens it and brings out a sword. It's broken. Not chipped, not worn. Broken. The blade ends about 2/3 of the way down, sheared off clean. The metal at the fracture point darkened like something burned through it at extreme heat. It shouldn't be worth keeping. Most people would have melted it down years ago. Hifrid holds it out and explains. This is Graham, a legendary blade. Emphasis on was, because the legendary part happened before it snapped in half during a battle that Hifrid doesn't get into the full details of. What Graham does, even in its broken state, is unique. It acts as a channel and shaper for raw, magical energy. Push magic through it, and instead of dispersing or exploding outward randomly, Graham compresses that energy into an exact, controllable form. The output is precise, surgical. The cost is that the sword draws directly from the user's life force to do it. Not just magical reserves, actual biological vitality. Use it too aggressively and you age faster, heal slower, burn through your body from the inside. It's not a weapon you swing casually. Hifrid demonstrates. He takes Graham out to the yard, channels what remains of his own magical ability through the broken blade, one arm, remember, because the other one is gone, and releases a single compressed strike into the air above them. The result is a column of pure force that vaporizes everything in a narrow band from ground to cloud. Clean erasure. Like someone took scissors to the air itself and cut out a strip of reality. The grass beneath the strike path doesn't even burn. It's just gone, along with a section of the clouds above, leaving a narrow band of clear sky visible through the overcast. Hifrid lowers the blade and looks at Aster calmly. That's what it does, he says. More or less. He gives it to Aster, and Aster takes it and goes to work. Training with Graham is a different experience than anything he's done before. In his first life, the challenge was purely physical. No magic, so everything came down to conditioning and technique. In his second life up to this point, the challenge has been suppression, keeping 7 wings worth of magical energy compressed and hidden so nobody sees what he actually is. Controlled output has been the goal. Stay small, stay invisible. Graham forces the opposite problem, because if you're going to use a sword that shapes magical energy precisely, you have to actually push magical energy through it, which means actually using it. Which means Aster has to stop suppressing and start directing. A completely different mental task that requires completely different instincts. He burns through the first few sessions just figuring out how to open the channel at all, without either flooding the blade or locking down reflexively. The frustrating thing is that his own trauma is getting in the way. Years of consciously suppressing his magic, in this life to stay hidden, and in the last life because apparently the suppression was being imposed on him externally without his knowledge, has created a deep psychological block. His body knows how to contain. It doesn't naturally know how to release, he pushes through it. Imperfect results at first, flares and misfires, and one session where he puts a Graham strike through 3 estate walls in a direction he wasn't aiming. Hifrid patches the walls without comment. He's getting closer, but closer isn't there yet. And then Kudo comes home. Kudo Elmheim, older sister, 5-wing knight, currently enrolled at the Dorsal Royal Knight Academy, and absolutely not the kind of person who calls ahead before arriving. She walks through the front door, drops her travel bag in the hall, looks at Aster once, and immediately tells him he looks soft. This is Kudo's love language. It takes some getting used to. She's formidable, genuinely, seriously formidable in a way that goes beyond just her wing count. 5 wings already puts her in the upper tier of active combatants, but what makes Kudo dangerous is the way she fights. Aggressive, unpredictable, with a personal style that throws out the classical forms whenever it suits her and invents new angles mid-sequence. She learned at the academy where people were trying to actually beat her, not demonstrate technique, and it shows. She challenges Aster the next morning. Aster accepts. Because refusing Kudo is only theoretically an option. They go out to the training yard, and for the first several minutes, Aster holds his own purely on technique, reading her movements, countering her sequences, keeping pace with 5-wing output through pure physical speed and sword knowledge. Kudo is fast. He's faster. The exchange is intense, back and forth, and Aster can feel himself keeping up, which is exactly when Kudo stops holding back. 5 wings, fully opened, is a different experience from 5 wings at 60%. The force behind her strikes doubles, then doubles again. The air pressure from her swings starts hitting before the blade does. Aster goes on the defensive fast, blocking, redirecting, burning through his energy reserves just to keep his guard from collapsing, and the block inside him tightens. Under real pressure, under genuine mortal stakes output from a 5-wing fighter, the instinct to suppress his magic digs in harder than ever. His body wants to lock down, contain, survive by making himself small. Kudo sees it happening. She's been watching for exactly this. She hits harder. Not cruelly, she knows what she's doing. She's forcing him past the point where suppression is a viable strategy, past the point where technique and physical ability can compensate for the massive magical differential between them, all the way to the edge where the only options are let the wall break or lose badly. The wall breaks. Not dramatically. Not in a single explosive moment. It's more like a dam developing a crack that spreads fast. The suppression fractures under the pressure, and suddenly Aster's magic is there, actually present in his hands, and his sword, and his movement in a way it hasn't been since. Honestly, since never, because even in his first life this was never available to him. He doesn't fully control it. His next strike is way too much. The output is off by an order of magnitude. The force blows past what he intended by a factor that sends both of them sliding back across the yard. But the connection is made. The block is broken. Kudo calls the duel. He'll think about it later. He has about 3 months of solid work integrating magic into his technique properly before the summons arrives. The Council of Elders, House Elmheim's governing body, the Old Guard, the long memory keepers of family tradition who have the authority to make decisions that even Roderick has to at least nominally respect. And the summons is directed at both Aster and Hifrid, which immediately signals that this isn't a routine gathering. Hifrid reads the letter, sets it down, tells Aster to pack lightly, they'll leave in the morning. Kudo intercepts Aster's carriage on the way out. She runs up to the side of it and grabs the window frame and leans in and starts telling Aster everything that's wrong with him and how he's probably going to make a mess of whatever's about to happen and how she doesn't understand why Hifrid lets him go anywhere unsupervised. Standard Kudo monologue. Aggressive, relentless, pointed. Except her voice is doing something that Kudo's voice doesn't usually do. There's a tremor under it that she's keeping controlled but not quite controlled enough, and her grip on the carriage frame is just slightly tighter than it needs to be. She's terrified. She knows what an Elder Council summons means when it comes with both their names attached. She knows what the main house considers the appropriate response to a branch family member who publicly humiliated their prodigy and then survived a wall throw from the Duke. She's running through the options, and none of them are good. She's not saying goodbye. Kudo would never say goodbye. The word probably doesn't exist in her vocabulary for emotional purposes. But she's also not letting the carriage leave without getting every single thing she thinks of him out of her mouth, loudly and at considerable length, because if she stops talking, she has to confront what she's actually feeling. Aster looks at her, really looks at her, and lets her finish. Then the carriage moves, and through the back window, he watches her standing in the road until she's out of sight. The council chamber is exactly what you'd expect from the Elmheim family's architectural sense. Massive, cold. Designed to make everyone who isn't seated at the high table feel small. Stone walls, high ceilings, the family banners hanging in a way that makes sure the main branch insignia is twice the size of anything else. The elders fill the high table. Most of them are old. All of them have the look of people accustomed to sentences being carried out rather than debated. At the center of the table is a man who makes even Roderick seem approachable by comparison. Zenas Elmheim, sixth head of the family. Ancient in the way that warrior nobles get ancient. Not frail, not diminished, just compressed down to something harder and colder and more dangerous than the original material. He's been running the family's shadow governance for longer than most people in this room have been alive, and his opinion of branch families can be inferred from the way he doesn't quite look at Hifrid when he speaks to him. His position is simple. The branch family has created an embarrassment. The main house's heir was publicly defeated. The Duke himself was provoked into a physical response at a formal gathering. The story is circulating through noble circles, and it reflects badly on the prestige of House Elmheim as a whole. The responsible thing, the only acceptable thing, is for this problem to be resolved cleanly. He doesn't say kill Aster. He says Hifrid should take appropriate corrective measures regarding the irregular element he introduced into the household. Same thing, more paperwork. Hifrid's response is immediate. He stands up and tells the council that he will offer his own head to the block before he lifts a weapon against his son. Not performed, not political strategy. He just says it, flatly, like a fact about the weather. He will die first. That's his position. That's where the conversation ends. The elders are not used to branch family members having positions. Zenas looks at Hifrid for a long moment, then his attention shifts to Aster. And Aster has been sitting quietly through this entire exchange, watching the room, calculating. He stands up and takes off his jacket. 7 wings unfold across his back. Not metaphorically, the crests are physically visible, luminous, each one distinct and fully developed and utterly unmistakable to anyone who has any education in magical crests at all. 7 of them, the mythological number, the originator endowment that the old texts describe and that no living person has documented in multiple generations. The chamber goes very quiet. Zenas's expression doesn't change, but his eyes do something, a flash of something that isn't quite fear, but is adjacent to it. The reaction of a man who just discovered that the problem he thought he was solving is significantly larger than he estimated. Aster speaks, quietly, without drama. The message is simple. If anyone in this room, in this family, takes action against Hifrid or anyone else in his household, the reaction will not be quiet or containable or something that preserves anyone's prestige. He is not a charity case. He is not an irregular element. He is the most powerful magical entity in this family, by a margin that makes the comparison insulting to both parties. He doesn't threaten specifically. He doesn't need to. The wings say everything. He puts his jacket back on and sits down. The elders confer quietly. Zenas looks at the table. The outcome of that conference is, ultimately, that the council needs time to deliberate appropriate next steps, which is how you say, we are absolutely not done with this, without losing face in the moment. Aster and Hifrid leave the chamber. But Aster is barely outside before a side door opens and 2 council guards appear with an invitation. More of a request, really, to accompany them to a secondary facility for what the council is calling a formal assessment of capability. Aster goes. He goes down. Underground. Long corridors, stone walls, the kind of lighting that suggests nobody comes down here for pleasant reasons. They put him in a chamber at the end of the corridor, close the door, and leave. He finds out pretty quickly why. There's something already in the room with him. It's large. It used to be a person, or something close to one. You can still see the shape of it under what it's become. An undead construct, heavily modified, with a regeneration ability that makes the concept of killing it feel genuinely theoretical. Weapons go in, wounds appear, the wounds close. The thing keeps coming, faster now, like getting hurt is accelerating something rather than slowing it down. Aster doesn't have a conventional solution to this. What he has is Graham. He draws the broken blade and channels his magic through it. Properly now, the way Kudo's duel forced him to learn. Not suppressed, not held back, just flowing steadily through the channel that Graham provides, and coming out the other side as something precise and controllable, and genuinely terrifying in scale. He creates a vortex, not a single strike. A sustained output, a localized field of compressed magical force that cycles continuously around a fixed point, each rotation tightening the destruction radius slightly, like a magical grinder running on his own energy. The construct walks into it, gets erased, regenerates, gets erased again. The regeneration can heal damage. It cannot restore matter that has been completely converted to nothing. You can grow back a wound. You cannot grow back particles that no longer exist. Aster holds the vortex. The construct regenerates. He holds the vortex. The regenerated tissue disappears. The process repeats. It takes a while. Graham is drawing on his life force the whole time, and by the end, Aster is pale and his hands are shaking slightly, and he's going to need a day of sleep to recover. But there comes a point where the construct tries to regenerate, and there simply isn't enough biomass left to reconstruct anything meaningful, and then there's less, and then the cycle closes and the room is quiet. Aster puts Graham away. The walls of the chamber are scorched in a perfect ring around the vortex point. The floor is cleaner in that circle than anywhere else in the room. The door opens. An elder is standing in the corridor looking in. The look on his face tells Aster everything he needs to know about whether that test went the way the council expected. He walks out, he goes home. He trains for 4 more years. 4 years! That's how long it takes between walking out of that underground chamber and walking through the front gates of the Dorsal Royal Knight Academy. 4 years of integrating everything: the magic, the technique, the control, the Graham training, the experience of actually using 7-wing output in a real combat scenario against something that didn't die easily. 4 years of growing, physically and otherwise, into the person the story needs him to be. The boy who left the council chamber pale and shaking is gone. The person who shows up at the academy registration is broad-shouldered, calm, and carries himself with the specific energy of someone who has absolutely nothing to prove to anyone in this building, but will prove it anyway if pressed. He registers under his full name, Aster Elmheim, branch family, Viscount Hifrid's household. The reaction from the other candidates is immediate and tells you everything about the academy's social ecosystem before a single class has started. A cluster of main house representatives near the registration table goes quiet and then starts talking again louder. Someone makes a comment, someone else laughs. The name Elmheim gets everyone's attention, but Branchline strips the prestige off it instantly and replaces it with something closer to amusement. Among those candidates, in the middle of that cluster, is a face Aster recognizes. Grian Elmheim. Second brother. The other one who held a blade that night in the courtyard of the First Life. Slightly younger than Darius. Considerably less physically impressive, but with a specific kind of intelligence behind his eyes that was always more dangerous than his brother's brute force approach. Grian is a schemer. He was one in the first life too. Their eyes meet across the registration hall. Grian's expression runs through a quick sequence. Surprise, calculation, contempt, before settling on something that looks like a smile but isn't. He says something to the person next to him, quietly. They glance at Aster and nod. Aster turns back to the registration desk and finishes signing his name. The games have already started. Day 1, first exam. The academy doesn't ease candidates in. The Dorsal Royal Knight Academy has a specific educational philosophy that can be summarized as, the ones who shouldn't be here will figure that out early, and the entrance examination structure reflects this completely. The candidates are brought to an outdoor arena. Large, open, with stone walls at the perimeter and a flat central space that's been cleared of everything except the candidates themselves and whatever they're carrying. The examiners take their positions at elevated observation points around the edges. No explanation of what's coming. No countdown. One of the senior examiners makes a brief statement about the exam being a test of survival instinct and magical capability, and then stops talking. A moment of silence. Then the sky opens up. Magical spears. Hundreds of them, manifested from pure energy and dropping from above in a dense spread pattern across the entire arena floor. Not aimed at individuals specifically, more like rainfall, except each drop weighs as much as a horse and hits with the force of a ballista bolt. The distribution is designed to cover the space so thoroughly that standing still is immediately fatal, and even moving is a serious gamble. Candidates scatter. The smart ones move to the edges. The stronger ones try to deflect. Shields, magical barriers, physical parrying with reinforced weapons. Some succeed, some don't succeed well enough and go down hard. The arena becomes chaos in about 4 seconds flat. Aster doesn't move. He stands exactly where he was when the spears started falling, in the middle of the arena floor, and watches the incoming projectiles with the same expression you'd use to check whether it's raining. The first spear hits his magical output and stops. Not deflected, stopped. Absorbed into a perimeter of compressed aura that Aster has expanded around himself at a radius of about 2 meters in every direction. The second spear hits the same perimeter and stops. The third. The fourth. He's not doing anything dramatic about this. No visible strain, no grand gesture. He's just standing there while magical artillery dissolves against his aura field like rain hitting a windshield. Then the spear density increases, the examiners adjusting the exam parameters in real time because this wasn't the expected response, and Aster responds by letting the field breathe. What comes out is a crimson storm. His aura expands outward from that 2-meter perimeter in a sudden release that sends every incoming projectile in a 30-meter radius spinning away from him simultaneously. The updraft from the force of that release is strong enough to be visible, a column of compressed air rising from his position that the other candidates feel as a shockwave, knocking some of them sideways even at a distance. The spears stop. The examiners at their elevated stations are writing things down very fast. In the observation area, separate from the examiners, a figure in academy uniform watches Aster's position in the arena and says nothing. Blue hair, director's insignia on his collar. Earl Mays, head of the academy, has the expression of a man watching something he's been waiting to see for quite a while. The first exam establishes one thing clearly. Aster passed. The second exam establishes something more complicated. The tactical siege. 3 candidate teams, each assigned a camp with a flag at its center. The objective is simple in description and nightmarish in execution. Secure your flag, capture others, last team standing with a flag wins. Teams are assembled partly by the examiners and partly by prior registration groupings, which means the main house's candidates end up clustered together and the everyone else candidates end up distributed across the remaining slots. Aster gets assigned to a mixed team. His teammates are a collection of lower-ranked noble candidates and a handful of commoner entrants, the exact demographic that the main house's candidates treat as convenient obstacles rather than actual competition. Among them is a nervous, calculating guy named Smite, who has the energy of someone who has already done a dozen risk assessments on every possible outcome of this exam and is currently updating them in real time. The team dynamic starts off fine. Rough, but fine. Then Grian gets to work. Here's the thing about Grian that makes him more dangerous than Darius ever was. He doesn't fight fair, and he's not embarrassed about it. Darius had pride. Pride is a vulnerability. You can use it, bait it, redirect it. Grian has no particular attachment to pride. He has goals, and he pursues them through whatever method is most efficient. And if that method is blackmail, then congratulations, he's about to blackmail someone. He gets to Aster's teammates before the exam's second phase starts properly. The specifics of what he has on them vary. Some financial, some social, some personal. But the message delivered to each of them is identical. Abandon your current team and come over to the main house alliance, or the thing Grian knows about you becomes public. Smite folds first. Then two others. Then a third. By the time Aster returns to camp from a perimeter check, he has 3 teammates left out of the original 7. The rest have quietly repositioned toward Grian's alliance, which has also absorbed most of the third team's capable fighters through similar methods. Smite won't meet his eyes. Aster surveys the reduced camp, counts the remaining people, checks the flag position, runs the math on what his actual options are. Then Christopher Nolan arrives. Nolan is the kind of rival character who makes the story better just by existing. Heir of the Nolan House, one of the old elite sword families, trained in a style called court swordsmanship that has about as much in common with the brutal, practical approach Aster uses as a concert violinist has with someone playing guitar in a field. Everything about his technique is precise and formal and rigidly classical in a way that works because the foundation it's built on is genuinely excellent. He's also operating under a personal code that he takes seriously enough to follow even when it costs him. Chivalric principles, structured rules of engagement, an absolute rejection of deception as a tactical tool, a genuine belief that how you win matters as much as whether you win. In the context of the Dorsal Royal Knight Academy entrance exam, this makes him an unusual figure. He's aligned with Grian's multi-team coalition right now, not because he approves of Grian's methods, he doesn't, and he's made that clear, but because the alliance was formed before he discovered what Grian was doing, and his code requires him to honor commitments already made. He approaches Aster's reduced camp for what is, by the coalition's plan, supposed to be a straightforward capture. Superior numbers, superior magical firepower, one isolated candidate with barely any support. This should take about 10 minutes. He and Aster square off. Nolan's opening sequence is genuinely impressive, a measured, controlled expression of court swordsmanship that creates offense and defense simultaneously, each movement economical and precise. He's not flashy, he's just very good. Then his blade connects with Aster's sword and the weapon shatters. Not Nolan's blade, Aster's. The sword the Academy supplied to Aster for this exam, standard equipment supposedly, fractures along the edge on first contact, then splits at the hilt on the second exchange, and by the third movement, Aster is holding a metal stick with no functional striking surface. The kind of breakage that doesn't happen with properly maintained equipment. The kind of breakage that happens when someone got to the equipment room first and made some modifications. Nolan pulls back. His expression runs through something complicated. He came here to fight, not to win on equipment sabotage, and this outcome doesn't satisfy his code at all. Aster backs off, retreats to his camp perimeter. Nolan doesn't pursue. He holds position and waits. Here's what Aster does in the next 4 minutes. He goes back into camp, finds Smite, and disarms him. Not violently, he just takes the sword out of Smite's hands with the calm efficiency of someone collecting something that belongs to them. Smite starts to object and then looks at Aster's face and decides not to finish the sentence. He has a functional weapon now. He goes back out. What follows is not a cautious strategic regrouping. Aster moves directly toward the coalition's primary camp, Grian's position, at a pace that suggests he's either extremely confident or has stopped caring about the difference between confident and reckless, and in his specific case, those two things might be identical anyway. The coalition has numbers. They have the main house's magical firepower, plus Nolan's technical excellence, plus the defectors who crossed over from Aster's original team. On paper, the numbers favor them by a significant margin. On paper, Aster hits the coalition's defensive line and goes through it. Not around it, not over it, through it, using a combination of 7-wing output kept carefully calibrated below the level that would reveal his actual ceiling and the pure technique advantage of someone who has been fighting people with magical power since before he could walk. Defenders go down. Not lethally, the exam has rules about permanent damage, but decisively, each one removed from the equation with the specific efficiency of someone who isn't angry about this, just busy. He reaches Grian. Grian has prepared for this. Of course he has. Grian prepares for everything. That's his whole approach. He's got 2 personal guards with solid wing counts, a defensive magical perimeter, and a backup plan that involves the defected teammates serving as a secondary line. Aster dismantles all of it. The guards go down. The perimeter gets overwhelmed. The defectors, watching their carefully calculated position dissolve in about 60 seconds, start performing rapid reassessments. Grian is out of moves. He's physically not in Aster's weight class, never was, and the scheming advantage only works when you have pieces on the board, and Aster has been removing pieces. His sword breaks on the exchange. Grian's backup weapon breaks on the follow-up. He ends up on the ground, captured, expressions cycling through humiliation and fury and something that might be fear underneath both of them. Aster drags him back to camp, not metaphorically, physically, by the collar, across the ground. It's deliberate, public. Every candidate in the exam can see it. Smite is watching from the camp entrance when Aster returns with his prize. He's also watching the people around him watch this. The defectors who crossed over under Grian's blackmail pressure. The remaining candidates from the 3rd team who didn't get absorbed into the coalition. The lower-ranked nobles who signed up for this exam knowing they'd be treated as cannon fodder by the main house contingent. Everyone is watching Aster drop Grian's captured form in the center of camp and dust off his hands. Aster turns to the assembled candidates. He doesn't give a grand speech. He's not a speech person by nature. What he does is lay out a simple calculation. Plainly, the way you explain arithmetic to someone who's getting confused about the math. The main house treats everyone in this room who isn't from the main house as an obstacle or a tool. That's not changing. Not this exam, not next exam, not for the duration of anyone's time at this academy. The only people who benefit from the current arrangement are the people at the top of it. Everyone else is either a footstool or a potential footstool. He's not asking them to like him, he's asking them to run the math. Something shifts in the crowd. You can see it happening. The private calculations updating in real time, the recalculation of which side of this equation is actually preferable. Smite looks at the ground. Then he looks at Aster. Then he looks at the people around him doing the same calculation. He switches sides. Then the person next to him. Then 3 more. The coalition, which was already diminished by Grian's capture, loses about half its remaining members in the span of 2 minutes, purely through people deciding they've been reading the room wrong. Nolan watches all of this from his position near the coalition's remaining camp. His code doesn't allow for switching sides mid-commitment. He honored the alliance he made, and now the alliance is effectively defunct through its own internal collapse. By the rules of his code, he's free. But Nolan doesn't walk away from things quietly. That's not how he works either. He approaches Aster directly. No posturing, no hostility, just a direct request for what he actually wanted from this exam to begin with. A real fight. Not sabotaged equipment, not coalition logistics, not Grian's schemes operating in the background. Just 2 capable people figuring out which one is better. It's a fair ask. Aster respects fair asks. Before that can resolve into anything, Aster does something that nobody, not Nolan, not the examiners, definitely not the remaining main house candidates, anticipated. He calls a meeting, all 3 camps. Every remaining candidate from every team gathered in a neutral space, with the exam technically still in progress around them. He presents an observation about the exam rules. The rules, as written, state that the winning condition is secured when a team holds all 3 flags simultaneously. They don't specify where those flags need to be held. They don't require them to be at separate camp locations. They just need to be in possession of a single entity at the same time. So, if all 3 camps voluntarily pool their flags into one location, one shared base, and that location is controlled by a unified group of candidates rather than 3 competing teams, then technically all flags are simultaneously held. Technically, by the written rules, every candidate in that arrangement passes. The examiners hate this. You can see them in the elevated stations scrambling through their rulebooks, looking for the clause that prevents this interpretation, and not finding it because the person who wrote the rules never imagined someone would do this instead of just fighting. The candidates love it. Even the ones who were competing against each other 30 minutes ago run the calculation fast, pass together or fight individually, and the individual fight option is looking considerably less appealing after watching what happened to Grian. They pool the flags. All 3 camps, 1 location, every candidate present. The senior examiner's face goes through an impressive sequence of emotions. before settling on the extremely specific expression of a bureaucrat who has just been beaten by their own paperwork. Everyone passes. Nolan looks at Aster with the expression of someone who wanted a sword fight and got a legal seminar, and is deeply unsure whether to be frustrated or impressed. Based on the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth, the answer is leaning toward the latter. Aster notes this. He'll need Nolan later. People who operate on a genuine code of honor are valuable in a school run by people who don't. Meanwhile, at the main Elmheim estate, Grian comes home. He walks through the front door of his family's wing with the specific energy of someone who has been dragged across gravel in front of a crowd and is trying to compose himself before facing people who will make the experience worse. His mother finds him first, then his siblings. The siblings in question are Julius and Lillian Elmheim, older, senior students at the Dorsal Academy, both of them holding ranks that put them at the top of the first-class curriculum. Julius is the kind of physically powerful that goes past impressive into slightly alarming to be near. Fire magic at a level that doesn't just burn things but restructures matter at the molecular level. Lillian is the quieter one, which in this context means she's the one you should actually be watching, because the quiet in her case is the kind that precedes very deliberate, very planned cruelty. They're called the Tyrant siblings by the student body. This is not affectionate. Grian's failure, public, documented, attached to his name in the exam records that every noble house will receive copies of, is to his family an unacceptable stain. The reaction is not comfort. The reaction is the Tyrant siblings delivering a comprehensive physical and verbal assessment of Grian's performance that leaves him considerably worse than Aster did. His mother watches, doesn't intervene. By the end of it, Grian is on the floor, and Julius and Lillian are already talking past him about next steps. The problem isn't Grian anymore. Grian is a symptom. The actual problem is the Branch family stray who just demonstrated on the Academy's first recorded exam that he can build a political alliance and dismantle a main house operation simultaneously. That needs addressing. They have a plan for addressing it. They have a tool. The Academy opens properly. Candidates are sorted into their curriculum grades based on exam performance, the ranking system that divides students into third class, second class, and first class, each split into 2 grades, 6 tiers total. Third class handles the ordinary swordsman, the people whose training is primarily physical without serious magical integration. Second class is the middle tier, solid magical ability, developing integration. First class is the elite, the fighters who have genuinely merged sword technique and magical output into something unified, the people who graduate to become royal knights. Aster's exam performance lands him in the 4th grade. Upper half of second class, pushing toward the first class threshold. For a first-year entrant with no prior academy training on record, this placement causes significant administrative confusion and several pointed conversations between examiners. He gets a dormitory assignment, standard academy housing, shared corridor, common areas. He picks up his class schedule, locates his rooms, puts his things away with the efficient minimalism of someone who's never attached much importance to objects. Then he goes looking for the cafeteria, because he hasn't eaten since morning. He finds the cafeteria. He also finds Alphen. Except it isn't Alphen. Not exactly. She's there, physically present, sitting at a table in the cafeteria, wearing the academy uniform. Same face, same height. But something is wrong in a way that registers before Aster can fully articulate it. Her posture is off. The way she's sitting, too still, too contained, like a puppet waiting for someone to pick up the strings. Her eyes, when they track movement in the room, do it in a way that doesn't match the Alphen he knows. There's no recognition in them when she looks at him, even though she should absolutely know his face. And on her face, attached at the jaw and temples and fitting over the lower half of her features, is a metal mask. Iron shackle, that's what it's called. Not just a physical restraint, but a magical device, and a genuinely vicious one. It attaches to the wearer and runs a continuous low-level magical current through specific neural pathways, gradually restructuring motivation and response patterns. Prolonged exposure doesn't just suppress the wearer's behavior, it actually modifies it, replacing their own priorities with whatever priorities the device is calibrated to enforce. The calibration on Alphen's shackle is simple. Absolute obedience to whoever put it on her. Who put it on her is not difficult to figure out. Aster's first instinct is to go straight for the mask. Remove it immediately, physically, and deal with the consequences after. He takes a step forward. Julius Elmheim steps into his path. Julius is larger in person than he seems from descriptions. Not just physically large, he takes up space in a room in a way that suggests his magical output is doing some of the work. Like he's slightly more present than most people, his energy crowding outward into the surrounding area passively without him doing anything deliberate about it. He's also relaxed, completely genuinely relaxed, the way people are when they're used to being the most dangerous thing in any room they enter. He explains the situation to Aster with the pleasant tone of a teacher describing a classroom policy. Alphen is currently under remedial behavioral correction, which is a function of the Iron Shackle program that senior students are authorized to administer to juniors who demonstrate deficiencies in discipline or academic performance. This is, technically, within the bounds of academy regulations as they are currently written. Aster's response to this is to attack him. Not escalation, immediate, direct, the fastest opening he can generate, while controlling his output to stay below the threshold that would start collapsing the cafeteria structure. He goes for Julius with intent, because there is no version of this conversation that ends with negotiation. The problem is that Alphen steps in front of him. She doesn't do it out of protective instinct. She doesn't look scared or conflicted or like she's making a choice. She steps in front of Julius with the mechanical precision of the shackle's behavioral modification doing its job. Blade already drawn, positioned between Aster and his target. He can't go through her. He won't. Julius watches this with the satisfied expression of a man whose strategy is executing correctly. The exchange that follows is brutal in a specific way. Not physically devastating, though it gets physical, but psychologically. Every time Aster tries to reach Julius, Alphen is there. His sister, controlled by someone else's device, running interference for the person who enslaved her. He has to keep pulling his strikes, redirecting, finding the path that doesn't go through her, and Julius uses every microsecond of that hesitation to maneuver. He hits Aster with fire. Not a warning shot, Julius uses fire the way other people use fists, deploying it with a casual intimacy that implies he's done this many times and finds the whole exercise somewhat routine. The burn is significant. Across the cafeteria, Nolan has been watching from the moment Julius appeared. He reads the situation correctly, sees what the Iron Shackle is doing, sees why Aster is restricted in his response, understands the mechanical trap being operated here. He makes a decision that his code supports: intervene. He steps in, challenges Julius directly, which gives Aster a moment to regroup and creates a second engagement thread that Julius has to manage. Julius manages it by grabbing Nolan's face. Fire magic applied directly to skin and bone at the range of 0 centimeters is not a gentle application. The burn that results covers half of Nolan's face and travels down his arm, and the sound it makes is not one that anyone in the cafeteria forgets quickly. Nolan goes down hard and doesn't get up. The cafeteria is completely silent. Julius releases him, straightens his uniform, and looks at Aster with the patient expression of someone who has made his point and is waiting for acknowledgement. Aster cancels his output. Not because he's afraid. The read he's doing on Julius in real time is telling him that going full output in a confined space with Alphen present is a risk he can't take, and Nolan is down and bleeding on the floor and needs attention before anything else. He stands down, temporarily. Earl Mays appears at the cafeteria entrance approximately 30 seconds later. The director walks in, takes one look at Nolan's condition, and makes an extremely sharp comment to Julius that contains within it the implicit statement that this incident is being logged, and that there will be consequences for magical violence resulting in severe injury outside of authorized combat contexts. Julius nods pleasantly and says he understands. Mays gets Nolan moved to the medical facility. Then he looks at Aster with the specific expression of a man who has a lot of questions and intends to ask exactly none of them in public. Nolan's burns are severe. The medical staff at the academy work quickly. They have experience with magical combat injuries, and the results are faster than they should physically be possible. The healing accelerated by whatever magical restoration techniques the academy employs. 3 days later, he's functional. The scarring on his face is real but survivable. He takes the outcome with the composure of someone who made a decision he'd make again. Aster visits him once in the medical wing. They don't talk much. But when Aster leaves, Nolan's position on the branch house versus main house question has quietly clarified in a direction that does not favor the main house. Aster, meanwhile, is figuring out his options. Alphen is here. She's under the shackle. Julius and Lillian put it on her deliberately. either before the academy year started or during the registration window, timed specifically to use her as leverage against him. The move is well designed. They knew he would come to the academy, knew he would find her, knew that the shackle's behavioral modification would create the exact conflict that played out in the cafeteria. He can't remove the shackle by force without hurting Alphen in the process. The device is attached in a way that requires either the key or surgical precision with magical tools he doesn't currently have access to. He can't go around Julius legally. The senior student's authorization of the shackle program is technically within the academy's existing rules, and the rules are written by people who've been letting the main house operate however it wants for a long time. What he can do is accept their terms. Julius, through a third party who delivers the message with the uncomfortable energy of someone who knows exactly what they're facilitating, presents an offer. Aster accepts an iron shackle himself, voluntarily, and wears it for 10 consecutive days. During those 10 days, he receives no food and no water, because the shackle's behavioral protocols prohibit the wearer from accessing nutrition independently, and no one will be bringing him any. If he completes 10 days in the shackle, Alphen goes free. Julius releases her mask and considers the debt paid. If he fails, if he removes the shackle early, or passes out and can't be revived, or simply doesn't make it, the deal terminates, and Alphen stays under the shackle indefinitely. 10 days, no food, no water, an iron mask corroding his magical ability with continuous suppression current. And Julius fully expects him to fail within 3, because no human being survives 10 days of that treatment at full functionality, and the ones who've tried have come out of it either broken or not at all. Aster accepts the wager. He puts the shackle on. Day 1 is fine, relatively speaking. The shackle sits against his face, heavy and cold, the magical suppression current running through it at a low continuous hum that he can feel in his back teeth. His wing crests are still there. The device doesn't eliminate magical ability, it just dampens the pathways, like trying to breathe through wet cloth. Everything is harder. Nothing is impossible yet. He trains. This is not the response Julius expected. Julius expected Aster to spend the first day conserving energy, maybe the second day doing light movement, and then the third day beginning the slow physical collapse that the shackle plus starvation combination inevitably produces. That's the documented pattern from every other student who's gone through iron shackle restriction. You fight it for a while, then your body does the math, and the math wins. Aster goes to the academy's outdoor training area on day 1 and works sword forms for 4 hours. Day 2, he does the same thing. Day 3, he moves into the forest at the edge of the academy grounds, because the forest has more space and fewer witnesses, and he can push his training harder without the social performance aspect of doing it, where people can observe and report back. The forest is where he does his actual work during the restriction period. Here's what 10 days without food or water actually does to a human body, even one backed by 7 wings of magical endowment. By day 3, the hunger has moved past the acute stage into something duller and more constant, a background noise rather than a sharp complaint. This is actually the body adapting, which sounds like good news but isn't, because what it means is that the body has started cannibalizing its own reserves and has adjusted its distress signaling accordingly. The acute pain goes away because the system has given up asking for what it needs and started making do. By day 5, the water deprivation starts hitting harder than the food. The human body can go weeks without food. It goes days without water before the compounding effects start accumulating. The cognitive fog, the muscle cramping, the way every physical movement costs slightly more than it should, because the systems running on hydration are running on less and less of it. By day 7, Aster's training sessions are shorter. Not because he's stopping voluntarily, because his body is starting to override his decisions in small ways, the way bodies do when they hit certain thresholds. He sets out to do 4 hours and finds himself sitting against a tree at the 2-hour mark without having consciously chosen to sit down. He gets up, he keeps going. The shackle's suppression current, which was a wet cloth feeling on day 1, is more like a hand around his throat by day 7. The magical pathways that connect his 7-wing reservoir to his physical output are compressed and sluggish. He can still access his power. The sheer volume of what he's carrying can't be completely shut down by a device calibrated for ordinary human magical levels, but the precision is gone. What comes out when he tries to channel is ragged and inconsistent, like trying to do fine detail work with hands that are shaking. He keeps training anyway, Not because he thinks it'll produce clean results, because the alternative is lying down, and Aster doesn't lie down. Julius checks in through intermediaries on days 3, 5, and 7. The reports he gets back are not the reports he expected. The expected pattern is clear physical deterioration, paired with declining training activity, paired with growing signs of behavioral modification from the shackle's neural current. The observed pattern is, the target is in the forest every day doing sword forms, while dehydrated and suppressed, and he looks terrible, but he's still moving. Julius is not worried. He's done this before. He knows what happens on day 8 and day 9. The body stops cooperating even when the mind insists, and the gap between intention and physical capacity becomes unbridgeable. Day 10 is theoretical at this point. Nobody makes it to day 10 in functional condition. He tells Lillian this. Lillian listens. Then she makes a decision that she doesn't share with Julius, because Lillian operates on the principle that solutions should be efficient rather than elegant, and the efficient solution to an obstacle is removing the obstacle before it becomes a demonstrated problem. She has people. High-grade fighters, students who owe her favors or worse, capable individuals at second-class level and above, who can be directed at a specific target without asking too many questions about authorization. She directs them at the forest on day 9. Day 9. Aster is in the forest. He's been out here since early morning, which at this point in the restriction period means he dragged himself out of his dormitory at dawn, despite the fact that standing upright requires a conscious effort that it didn't require a week ago. His body has the specific quality of something running on the last of its reserves, functional in the way that a fire is functional when it's burning the furniture instead of the firewood. He has no sword with him today. The Academy's equipment room wouldn't give him one. Standard restriction protocol, no equipment access for shackled students, and he's been doing the last few days training either empty-handed or with branches, working on the movement patterns and the magical circulation exercises that don't require a blade. He's sitting against a tree doing breathing work when he hears them coming. Not stealthy. Lillian's people aren't trying to be quiet, they're trying to be fast, and fast in numbers doesn't benefit from stealth. 4 of them emerge from the tree line at different angles, covering the space around him, each one carrying a proper weapon and a specific assignment. Aster looks at them from where he's sitting against the tree, counts them, assesses. He's feverish. Actually feverish. His temperature has been climbing since day 8 as his immune system starts operating with insufficient resources, and the shackle's suppression current is doing something uncomfortable to the way his body is managing that. His vision is slightly wrong at the edges. His hands, when he looks at them, have a faint tremor. He gets up anyway. What follows is not a heroic comeback sequence. Not immediately. This is important, because Aster at 60%, even suppressed and starving, is a serious problem for second-class opponents. But Aster at whatever percentage he's currently operating at, day 9, no food, no water, fever, shackle suppression, is running on something different from normal capability. The technical precision is gone. The controlled output he's developed over years of careful gram training is inaccessible through the wet cloth suffocation of the shackle. What he has is raw instinct, physical conditioning that goes deep enough to partially survive the resource depletion, and the specific stubbornness of a person who has already died once and found the experience underwhelming. He takes damage. Real damage, not the kind he can shrug off. Actual impacts landing on limbs and his torso because his reaction speed is running behind where it should be, and his evasion patterns are firing slightly late. The first exchange leaves him bleeding from a cut along his forearm. The second puts him against a tree trunk with force enough to crack it. He responds, blocks what he can, redirects what he can't, uses the weight of his opponent's attacks against them where the opportunity exists. He's technically outmatched right now, and they know it, and he knows it. They press the advantage. All 4, now, the perimeter they were maintaining collapsing inward because they can see the gaps in his response, and they're professionals enough to exploit gaps when they appear. He goes down to one knee. The pressure on his chest from the shackle's suppression current spikes. The device seems to respond to stress by intensifying its output, which in this moment is the worst possible design feature it could have. He can feel it pressing against his magical pathways like a hand pushing down on a spring, and the spring is pushing back because 7 wings of magical energy does not compress quietly, and the feedback between the suppression and his body's survival response is creating something unstable in his chest. His vision narrows. The fever is doing something to his perception. Sounds are slightly wrong, distance is harder to judge, The 4 opponents circling him have edges that seem to vibrate. One of them raises a weapon for a downward strike. And then something happens that Aster did not plan, did not consciously initiate, and did not fully understand until after it was over. His body decides it isn't dying again. Not his mind. Not a decision from the thinking, planning part of him that has been running calculations about magical output and tactical positioning since the fight started. Something deeper, the part that crawled over a mountain as an infant, the part that held a magical vortex against a regenerating monster until the monster ran out of matter to regenerate with, the part that is fundamentally, biologically, at the cellular level unwilling to let this be the ending. His 7 wings, compressed under the shackle's suppression current, find the gaps. The shackle is calibrated for human magical levels. 7 wings is not a human magical level. The suppression current is designed to reduce normal magical pathways to a trickle, but it's designed for normal. Against 7 wings, the trickle is still a river by ordinary standards, and under survival state stress, that river finds the cracks in the suppression architecture and flows through them. What comes out doesn't look like anything Aster has done before. No sword, no gram to shape and direct the output, just raw magical energy, finding the only available path, his body itself, his limbs, the space immediately around him, and expressing itself in the form it can take given the constraints. Wind, not gentle, compressed, shaped instinctively by some deep part of his understanding of magical output that he didn't know he had. The energy comes out of his hands and forearms as concentrated blades of cutting force. Wind cutters, the term surfaces in his mind from somewhere, maybe a technique he read about once, maybe something that just describes itself accurately. Thin edges of magically compressed air, moving at a velocity that puts them somewhere between a blade strike and a projectile. The opponent raising the weapon for the downward strike stops raising it. Then he goes backward, fast, because a wind cutter has passed through the space he was occupying, and the physics of that interaction did not favor him. A second one hits the tree to the right of another opponent. Not the opponent, the tree, because Aster's aim at this point is what you'd charitably call directional rather than precise. The tree does not enjoy the experience. A section of it simply ceases to be a section of that tree. The 4 opponents reassess. This reassessment happens quickly and unanimously. What they were sent to neutralize was a starved, suppressed, feverish student who was already down on one knee. What is currently pointing wind-shaped magical edges at them from the hands of a swordless, weaponless person is a significantly different problem statement. They fall back. The perimeter breaks. 2 of them turn and move toward the tree line. The other 2 hold for a second longer, long enough to confirm that the wind cutter output is not a one-time fluke. Aster fires another one, and the bark comes off a tree at head height with a crack loud enough to echo. And then they also go. Silence in the forest. Aster is still on one knee. The fever hasn't broken. His hands are shaking. The cut on his forearm is still bleeding. Slower now but present. The shackle is still on his face, still running its suppression current, still making everything harder than it should be. He looks at his hands. The wind cutter output has faded now that the immediate survival trigger has released. It's not something he's consciously holding. It was something that happened and has now stopped happening. But the pathway it used is still there, freshly opened by the stress response, and he can feel it in the way you feel a muscle you didn't know existed after the first time you use it. He can do that again, deliberately. He'll need to learn the control for it, the way he had to learn control for everything else, but the mechanism is there. His body found it because it needed it, and now he knows where it is. He gets up, both knees, then both feet. Slow, because his body is making him earn every centimeter of vertical progress right now, but continuous. He has 1 day left. Day 10 starts before dawn. He doesn't sleep much anymore. The fever and the dehydration and the shackle's constant neural interference have made sustained sleep difficult since day 7. He drifts. He surfaces. He does breathing work in the periods between because it's something he can do lying down that still counts as preparation. When the light starts coming through the dormitory window, he gets up and gets dressed and goes to find Julius, not confrontationally. He doesn't go looking for a fight, he goes to complete the terms of the wager, because the wager specified 10 days, and he's done 10 days, and the agreement has a very specific clause about what happens at the end of 10 days if he's still standing. He's still standing! Julius is in the senior student common area when Aster arrives. He looks at Aster the way you look at something that didn't behave according to your model of it. Not quite disbelieving, but recalibrating. The physical evidence in front of him is undeniable. Day 10. On his feet. The shackle still on, still running, which means Aster didn't cheat the restriction by removing it early. 10 days. The terms of the wager are clear. Julius is not the kind of person who enjoys losing, but he is, in his specific way, someone who operates within structures. Structures he controls and designs, usually, but structures nonetheless. Welching on a formal wager in front of witnesses is a different category of problem than losing a fight. He made a deal. He produces the key. Alphen's shackle comes off. She doesn't come back immediately. This is something Aster needs to understand, and Hifrid told him about it before he left for the academy. The behavioral modification from extended shackle exposure doesn't reverse the moment the device is removed. The neural pathways that got restructured need time to reset. She'll be confused. She may not recognize him right away, or she may recognize him but not fully understand the context of why she's here or what just happened to her. She's sitting in the same cafeteria where he found her, because that's where she's been stationed during the restriction period, and when the mask comes off and she blinks into the light of the room without the suppression current running through her face for the first time in weeks, she looks disoriented in the profound way of someone who just woke up from a dream that lasted too long. She looks around the cafeteria. Her eyes find Aster. There's a long moment. Then something in her face. The stiffness, the puppet quality, the held-back blankness that the shackle installs to replace normal expression, cracks. Like ice in spring, the wrong metaphor given where this story started, but accurate anyway. It cracks, and under it is Alphen, the actual Alphen, looking at her brother with the dawning horror of someone who is beginning to reconstruct what happened to them. He crosses the cafeteria. She doesn't say anything. He doesn't need her to. She notices the state he's in, the pallor, the weight he's dropped over 10 days, the cut on his arm that he didn't let the medical staff look at because visiting the medical wing during the restriction period felt like the wrong signal to send. Her expression goes through something complicated and then settles into the specific emotion of someone who is furious on someone else's behalf and trying not to let it overwhelm the reunion. He tells her she doesn't need to be furious right now. There's time for that later. She is furious right now anyway. This is very Alphen, the gentleness and the protectiveness operating simultaneously, refusing to be separated from each other. Nolan finds him that afternoon. He's recovered from the burns. The scarring is there, will be there permanently on that side of his face, but the functional damage is healed, and he moves without the guarded quality of someone managing pain. He locates Aster in the Academy's east corridor and falls into step beside him without preamble. He says he heard about the wager. He says he heard about the 10 days. He says he heard about what happened in the forest on day 9. Then he says something that costs him something to say. You can hear it in the careful way he constructs the sentence. That he misjudged the situation when he initially aligned with Grian's coalition. Not the alliance itself, because he honored that commitment correctly by his own code, but the assessment he made of what was actually happening in this academy, and who the actual threat was, and where his chivalric principles actually pointed when applied to real conditions rather than theoretical ones. He doesn't apologize exactly. His code doesn't really do apologies. It does corrections. He's correcting his course. Aster nods, accepts this. They walk together down the east corridor for a while in the comfortable quiet of two people who have figured out they're on the same side of something without having to spell it out extensively. Earl Mays calls Aster into his office that evening. The director's office is exactly the kind of space you'd expect from someone who runs a prestigious military academy while secretly operating as a member of the Elder Council with his own agenda, organized in a way that looks neutral but contains a lot of information if you know how to read rooms. Mays is seated behind his desk when Aster enters, blue hair slightly disarrayed in the way that suggests he's been here since early this morning, dealing with the fallout from the last 10 days. He doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He acknowledges the completion of the wager. He acknowledges Alphen's release. He makes a carefully worded statement about the Iron Shackle program and its authorized applications that contains within it the implication that what Julius and Lillian did with it in this case was within the letter of current regulations but not something Mays personally endorses, without saying any of this directly. Then he says something more direct. The situation with the Tyrant siblings is not resolved by Alphen's release. Julius and Lillian have been running their specific operation in this academy for 3 years. The Iron Shackle program, the senior to junior behavioral correction system, the entire apparatus they've constructed, it's been tolerated, because the people it targets have historically been unable or unwilling to push back in a way that forces institutional response. The regulations that nominally govern it are written loosely enough to accommodate what they do. What happened with Aster changed the calculus. Not because the administration is suddenly moved to act, Mays is careful not to say that, but because the demonstration of what Aster is willing to endure to protect someone in his household, combined with the demonstration of what he's physically capable of when pressed to his limits, has created a situation that is no longer containable through the normal methods the main house uses to contain problems. He says this with the neutral tone of a man presenting facts. Then he says, also with neutral tone, that as the director of this academy he has certain authorities regarding curriculum structure and trial administration and inter-student conflict protocols that he intends to use going forward in ways that may prove useful to students operating in good faith under difficult conditions. He doesn't say he's on Aster's side. He says he's interested in the disruption of certain power structures that have made this academy function incorrectly for too long. Aster reads this correctly. Mays is a pragmatist with his own goals, not an ally in the uncomplicated sense. But their goals overlap significantly, and in the specific ecosystem of a noble military academy, overlapping goals are a workable foundation. He thanks the director and leaves. The days after the restriction period have a particular quality to them. The physical recovery is happening fast, faster than it should for someone who just spent 10 days without nutrition, which tells you something about what 7 wings of magical endowment does for biological resilience. His appetite is ferocious, and he feeds it without apology. His hands stop shaking by day 2 post-restriction. By day 4, he's back in the training area at full duration. The wind cutters are still there. He works on them deliberately now. Careful, methodical sessions in the forest where he focuses on the pathway he opened during the ambush and tries to build control over it the way he built control over everything else. Precision first, distance second, velocity third. The technique is crude right now. The forest trees have the evidence of this on them, at various heights and angles, but the foundation is real. He can feel the difference between accessing it intentionally and what happened on day 9, when his body produced it instinctively under survival pressure. The goal is to make the intentional version as reliable as the instinctive one. He's getting there. Lillian, meanwhile, is not done. This is the thing about the Tyrant siblings that makes them dangerous in a way that goes beyond raw magical power. They're patient. Julius operates with the confidence of someone who's always been the strongest person in the room and expects to continue being that person. Lillian operates with the patience of someone who has never once in her life needed to be in a hurry, because she plans far enough ahead that urgency is rarely required. The failed forest ambush hasn't deterred her. It's recalibrated her. The operatives she sent came back with a report that changed her model of what Aster's actual capability is under compromised conditions. And Lillian, unlike people who respond to surprises with anger, responds to them by updating her model. What she's building now is something more structured. The Academy's 4th grade curriculum includes a mandatory field trial, a multi-day outdoor exercise in a designated area of the forest, designed as a practical assessment of the skills students have developed in their first semester. Supervised, nominally, but the supervision is distributed, and the territory is large, and there are periods during the trial where individual students are operating alone or in small groups without direct oversight. She's been speaking to people about the trial structure, asking questions about the oversight schedule and the patrol rotations and the specific areas of the designated territory where communication with Academy staff is most difficult. This is Lillian planning. The trial is weeks away. She's already started. Grian doesn't approach Aster directly after the exam results are formalized. He's smart enough to understand that direct confrontation has produced a 0% success rate for him so far, and that his personal ceiling in a one-on-one situation with his branch family cousin is not high enough to make a third attempt worthwhile. What he does instead is work the social ecosystem. The Academy's student hierarchy is deeply interconnected with the Noble House hierarchy outside it, and Grian is skilled at navigating that kind of structure, calling in connections, applying the quiet pressure of family standing, making sure that certain doors are slightly less open for Aster's cohort than they would otherwise be. It's the kind of campaign that doesn't produce dramatic moments. It produces accumulated friction, slightly less access to certain resources, slight delays in administrative processes. Small obstacles that individually seem like coincidence, but together form a pattern. Aster notices the pattern. He notes it and files it and continues training, because the pattern is annoying but not threatening, And Grian working the social levers is Grian not working the dangerous levers, which is a trade Aster will take. Nolan notices too. He has a cleaner read on the Noble House social ecosystem than Aster does. It's his native environment in a way it isn't quite Aster's, and he starts routing around Grian's interference quietly, using his own connections and family standing to neutralize the friction in specific situations where it matters most. They don't formally agree to do this together. It just happens, the way things happen between people who are paying attention to the same problems and happen to be standing near each other. Alphen recovers. Slower than Aster would like, but steadily. The behavioral modification from the shackle retreats day by day. She's herself again in the ways that matter, recognizes faces, responds to conversation naturally, makes the small, gentle observations about the people around her that have always been characteristic of how she sees the world. But there are moments, usually when someone raises their voice unexpectedly or moves too fast near her, where something in her expression tightens in a way that wasn't there before. She doesn't talk about what the shackle period was like from the inside. Aster doesn't ask. He can infer enough, and inference is sufficient. What she does talk about, eventually, is what she noticed before the shackle, in the weeks between arriving at the academy and when it was put on her. The social architecture of the place. Which students are afraid of whom? Which corridors are avoided after certain hours? Which of the senior students are running which aspects of the fear economy that the Tyrant siblings have built around themselves over 3 years? She has a remarkable memory for social detail. She noticed things while she was here as herself that map out exactly how Julius and Lillian's operation functions, who it relies on, which parts of it are load-bearing, and which parts would collapse if specific pressure was applied to specific points. Aster listens to all of this, asks questions when something needs clarification, builds a map. The map is for later. Right now, the 4th grade field trial is coming, and whatever Lillian is planning for it, he intends to be ready. The forest. He's back out here every morning before classes, working the wind cutter pathway, pushing the precision further each session. No sword. The shackle period taught him something about swordless combat that he didn't fully have before, and he's integrating that now into his overall approach. The Graham technique is still his heavy artillery, but having a reliable magical output that doesn't require a weapon is a different kind of freedom, and freedom in combat is always worth developing. The morning light comes through the trees at the angle it does in late autumn, long and low, turning the forest floor gold and amber. His breath clouds in the cold air. He takes his stance and runs the exercise from the beginning. First the pathway, then the compression, then the release, then the aim. The aim is the part he's still working on. The pathway and the compression he's got. The release he's got. The aim is where 7-wing output needs more discipline than his instincts currently provide. A wind cutter leaves his hand and takes a branch off a tree 30 meters away at the exact height he aimed for. He pauses. Does it again. Same result. He runs it 5 more times. 4 out of 5 hit the targeted point. 1 goes slightly wide. 10 centimeters off, which at 30 meters is actually reasonable accuracy for a technique he invented 9 days ago by accident under fever conditions. He lowers his hands, looks at the forest, breathes. Somewhere behind him, in the academy, Lillian is planning. Julius is confident. Grian is working the social levers. The Elder Council is watching. Roderick is out there, somewhere, running his own calculations about the branch family stray who keeps refusing to stay in his assigned category. The field trial is in 3 weeks. He takes his stance, runs the exercise again. What's coming is bigger than a field trial, bigger than Julius and Lillian, bigger than the academy itself. The whole structure of House Elmheim, the main branch's stranglehold on the family's power, the Council of Elders, the shadow authority of Zenus, the systematic cruelty that treats branch families as furniture and orphans as livestock, all of it runs on the assumption that the people at the bottom of it don't have the capacity to push back. Aster has been pushing back his whole life, both of his lives. He just didn't always have the power to make it stick. He has the power now. The shackle couldn't take it. The starvation couldn't take it. The ambush in the forest couldn't take it. His body found a new weapon in the moment it needed one, and that is, when you think about it, the whole story of Aster in miniature. Give him a wall, he finds a way through it, and comes out the other side knowing something he didn't know before. The wind cuts through the trees. He fires another blade of compressed air into the morning light. The branch swings. The leaves fall. He's not done yet. Not even close.